Hey everybody, and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Debbie and I'm a mixed media artist. If you're one of my lovely regulars, welcome back. I mean, newbies, welcome too. Everybody, welcome. That's the main thing. Before I get started, actually, if you like what you see today, don't forget to leave me a like and subscribe and a comment if you have the time. And if you like my style of painting and working, then do consider joining my Patreon. You've got all the details in the description box below. I, as I said, am a mixed media artist, which means I use everything I can get my hands on. Everything from watercolor to collage. And today I'm doing another one of my favorite 5 videos, which has been an extremely popular series, actually. I had no idea when I first dreamt it up that it would be so very popular, but indeed it is. So thank you very much for that. And the way this works is every time I do one of these, I pick within a particular mixed media group, I pick 5 of my favorites, plus an honorable mention quite often because I can never keep it to 5. So I may not use all of these today, but these are my favorite 5 inks. So inks is today's topic. And I love ink. I haven't used it. I mean, it's been sporadic over the 40 odd years that I've been painting. But just recently I found that it really works for this time of the year. And let me explain a bit there. Basically, like I said, I use everything I can get my hands on. You want to see my art room. But I have a particular kit of materials that works. For example, in the summer, I love my gouache to put down a base with. Then I go over the top of that with coloured pencils and then fine liners, acrylic markers, things like that. And it's, that's fabulous. In autumn, it all changed again. And now I'm finding at the end of autumn, beginning of winter, I'm filming this in November. We're the 29th of November today. So here in Germany, we're going into winter, and it certainly looks like it after a storm we had the other night. No leaves left on the trees. So I've got a different kit, and my kit this time includes inks. And the thing about these inks, they're all different sorts. They're all mixed up, but they're all Lightfast. And this is what I need. I don't know about you, but I get in the heat of the moment, I'll go quite mad and end up forgetting what I'm using because I'm after a colour and I forget about its properties. That's okay if I'm in my sketchbook because it's not going to see the light of day, or at least it's not going to see the light of day very often. Whereas if I was to make something to frame and put on the wall and something to sell, which is an even bigger disaster, which occasionally does happen, you don't want it to disappear. That's not fair to anybody, and it's unpleasant if that happens to somebody you've sold your piece of artwork to. Everybody's disappointed, and it's just not great. So I don't buy any of these things. I've got a few things here in my kit, but I don't use them. I'm very careful, and I hate that. I hate having to be careful. I want to just get on and paint knowing that I'm safe. So these are all Lightfast. And Lightfast means they're pigment-based rather than dye-based. Dye-based things are just about always fugitive. There are some exceptions. I can't think of any. So take it to the bank. Pigment-based is best. So what have I got here? I've got some Raw and Klingner antique ink in slate grey. This is a German brand that I love very much. As you can see, generous bottles and not incredibly expensive. You can use them in pens and with all sorts of different media tools, but I use mine with my brushes. Then we have a Jacques Herbin, Les Toits de Paris, which is the roofs of Paris. Thanks to Napoleon Bonaparte, we have this colour because he instigated the use of zinc on Paris roofs, which was a bit cheaper and easy to put on. And it's this particular grey. So thank you to him. This is a nice one. Very nice, actually. And good for sky. Both of these are good for skies and water. And this one is, like I said, Les Toits de Paris, the roofs of Paris. And that is the actual colour of it. I love these. They've got this little part here, I'm not sure if you can see that, where you can actually rest your dip pen or your brush. The next one along is a Daler Rowney FW. It's an acrylic ink. You can see the pigment in the bottom if you get some, and then there's some in the top. It's a different pigment color, so it needs a good old shake. This one's a really nice brown, and it's called Antelope Brown, and I particularly love that one as well at this time of the year. Then we have another Jacques Herbin. This one is Brun Eiffel. This one is Eiffel Tower Brown. And again, this one's a writing ink. This one's a writing ink. That one's acrylic ink. And this one is an antique ink, which is good for sketching. Then again, another Raw and Klingner one, Sketch Ink. This one is Emma, and that is referring to this particular green. And there are some very quirky illustrations on some. If you buy Lily, you'll know exactly what I mean. This one is good for, here it says rollerball pens, fountain pens, brushes, waterproof, and all sorts of things like that. Beautiful, beautiful green. And I'm a bit fussy about my greens, if I'm honest. It has to be just the right sort of green. That's the right sort of green. And the last one is another FW from Daler Rowney, and this one is my honourable mention, and it is Peach Pink. I have given this a bit of a shake. The good thing about these two, these will go over all the others. They tend to be a little bit more opaque. They're not completely opaque, but they're more opaque, and you can put them over the top of other things, which is really quite nice. But I tend to layer these on in subtle layers, and then I go over the top with other mixed media. So let us, first of all, swatch. Now, you may notice I have a tile. It's just a normal wall tile. Cheap. Stolen, actually. Stolen from my husband. Don't tell him. He has a box of tiles in the shed, and he hasn't missed this one. A tile is really handy. It can't have much. I mean, I would have preferred a white tile, obviously, but this one's okay. And let me just bring it into the light here. Sorry about the reflection there. It's a cheap palette, and it's really good for inks. It's also good if you need to get one of your fine liners going if it's decided to give up the ghost. But it's really, really good for putting a little bit of ink and some water together so that you can make a mix that you can use. And the brushes I'm using are a various mixture here as well. I've got my usual dome blender, which those of you who have been here before will have seen this brush before. This one's a Deerfoot blender. This is about 27 years old and is left over from the days when I used to teach folk art. And it's a stippling brush, which I particularly love with inks. And then I've just got a round brush, which, again, might not use those. I might find something else. So let us first not take up too much room, but let's just I always give them a shake because these are pigment inks and you want to have them all nicely mixed up. It'll cause a bit of froth on the top, but that's okay. So this one, and here again, I'll take some out sometimes and put it on my tile and think, oh yeah, that could have a little bit of water mixed in with it, especially when we come to painting. At the moment, we're just swatching, so we don't need to worry too much. But this is a very nice grey. It's got plenty, it's fabulous pink pigment payoff. I don't want to encroach onto our sketch area there quite yet, but really, really nice. It's quite a cold grey. I tend not to go for a cold grey, actually. On to this next one. This is the Roofs of Paris. I tend to usually go for a warm grey, especially with my gouache, but that's also good for summer, whereas we're in winter now, so these colder greys work a little better. This one is a little bit, it's got slightly bluer note to it there, as you can see. It sort of looks like if it was, there's a bit of chromatography going on there. It would like to separate out that first one, and probably on the right sort of paper, as in a really, really heavy cold pressed watercolor paper, I think it could be persuaded to granulate. I haven't tried that yet. I may do. But the trouble is I don't use that sort of paper because I can't put my coloured pencils over the top. It tends to sort of skip over all the lumps on the paper, and it's not good. For the sort of work I do with mixed media, you're much better off with a smoother paper. Now, another point here, I'm going to just bring something out here. These are terribly bad for the environment, unfortunately. However, it's up to you not to use them once, use them hundreds of times, and I've had some of these for years. And when I say years, I'm talking 15 years I've been using the same ones. These are a plastic pipette. As you will have noticed just now, there's no pipette in these bottles, these two here, whereas this one obligingly does have a pipette, which means I can put some out and just use that. For these others, you can either dip your brush in the ink, which is number one, not advisable, and number two, by the time I've gotten down to the bottom of this rather large bottle, it's not going to be possible either. Probably have to rinse it out with water at that point. But these pipettes are pretty good, actually. And like I said, they're not great for the environment, but we do need some tools. So sometimes we have to choose stuff that's not brilliant and then reuse it until the wheels fall off it. That's a simple fact of life, the way I see it. Get a glass one by all means, but it has to be deep enough to reach the bottom of the bottle. And this is quite long. We're talking about 8 inches, 20 centimetres, thereabouts, if I've got that right. Please don't quote me. But anyway, so that's another option. This is the Antelope Brown, and it looks green for starters. But when you swatch it out, you realise it is indeed brown. And that works nicely too at this time of the year. The thing you'll find, this is moving into here at the moment because it is wet on wet. And wet on wet blends, wet on dry layers, which is why we always dry the previous layer before we put something else on over the top of it, unless you want these effects. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's actually quite nice and can work for you. The other thing to consider is absolutely gone out of my mind. If it ever comes back, I'll let you know what it was. This is Emma. This is the green ink. Oh, and do make sure you put your fingers in it and put it everywhere. Okay, so this is the green ink, and this one is another one by the same company as this here. The first one, Raw and Klingner, an old German one, and as you can see, it is a particularly nice green. That's the sort of green that I think about when I think about green. And you might say, well, look, you know, green in winter. Do we need green in winter? Absolutely, we need green in winter. I grew up in Australia, as you can probably hear from my accent, and winter and autumn was the only time we had green grass on the lawn. Actually, I was 10 years old before I understood fully that lawns weren't brown as part of their life. Well, I guess it is as part of their life cycle, really, but you know what I mean. It's pretty dire. So this one, again, dipping into the bottle is not advisable. This is one of my favourite browns. It's honestly, it could be a lot of things, you know. Let it go with a little bit of water there, just blot that slightly. It is the most beautiful colour, and you might wonder why I've bought such a tiny bottle since it's so good. That's because when I first bought this grey, I bought it in this tiny bottle by accident, and actually it's a really good way of testing the ink, because this costs about €2. This was about 6, and this is 30 ml. This is about 10 ml. Yeah, 10 ml. So it's the same company, same ink, and it's available in either size bottle. But the little one is particularly good if you're going out into the wild, so to speak. Okay, so this one is my honourable mention, and that is the peach pink one. Or is it, did I say? Yes, peach pink. Gosh, I can never remember the names of things. It's just, yeah, I have to keep looking. Peach pink, and it's a little bit more opaque, as you can see. But it's quite a nice colour, and it fits in very well with these others. So normally with my favourite fives, I have gone from one company only, like Derwent, or Derwent Drawing very specifically, or Derwent Lightfast, and I've picked all of my favourites from just that little bit. But this time I've decided to do a sketch with all of these different sorts of inks because there are so many different ones here that we can use and they all go together. That's the great thing about mixed media. They go together and you don't have to be putting them out and saying, right, well, I'm only going to use this brand today or only going to use this brand today. Mix them up and have fun. Right, let's paint something. I'm going to start out with the roofs of Paris and I'm going to start out with my brush that I've been using. Let's hope it's fairly clean. The water really isn't. Like I said, I shouldn't be doing this. And I'm going to just, at the moment, get some water onto the page. Like I said, you don't normally see the water, but this isn't as clean as it could be. So let's do a... Oh, I know what I was going to say. So before I lose it again, these don't move around like watercolour do. Once they've gripped the paper and they're in place, they're in place. That's what I was going to tell you. So whereas watercolour might be able to be re-wetted, not these. Bit of a mark there in the centre where the page is folded. Once they're re-wetted, once they're dry, you can't re-wet them and they don't move around like watercolours do, where you can sort of persuade them into another part of the page. That's not going to happen. I'll tell you what is going to happen. I shall be right back with some clean water. Right, that's a bit better. Nice clear water. I don't know what's wrong with me sometimes. This is also fairly dry now. So what you can do there is, get that off the brush, you can then beef up the sky a little bit, if you want a bit more texture, by just adding a little more to it. See, that one's dry. Don't want huge amounts, but you know, if there's a storm coming, and in this world there definitely is, and you'll notice here how it's layering. Remember, wet on wet blends, wet on dry layers. And if you want layers as opposed to blends, then it's absolutely vital to get those sort of steps right. What I've done there is I've just sort of softened the edges of what I did with some clean water on my brush, and it now is clean, thank goodness, because it makes a little difference. Clouds don't normally have completely straight edges. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do, let me see if this is still viable. Yeah, it is actually. Put some ink, put some water with it. This is the Antelope Brown FW from Dale Rowney, so it is the acrylic ink. I'm just going to put a bank of light trees and then some foreground interest. Just a quick sketch just to show you how I might use these. And I've got a lot of water here for starters. Some of it I'm just sort of getting the colour onto the page rather than worrying about anything else very much. Because what we can do then is we work out where the horizon is, so it'd be about there. And we've got this bank of trees in the background, and what I will do now is on this first shadow is start building up some of the textures on the trees, and this brush is particularly good for doing that actually. Might need a bit more water. That ink's been sitting there for a while. The main thing is to start to differentiate between the background trees and my foreground interest. So I really like these textures. They stay there, and like I said, you can go over the top. Put some other colour in there actually, somehow, goodness knows. Okay, and then clean the brush. What I'm going to do is give myself a bit more of that and a bit of green. Don't need very much at a time either. Don't know that we'll use this slate grey one at all, and this is a good thing about having our colours. Using this pipette, just grab a little bit of that out. Gosh, mainly froth. Any ink in there? That's good. What I do then is I squeeze it into my water to clean it out. It'll stay stained, but the good thing about that is you can see which one you used with which ink. And yeah, they're particularly good. Like I said, the things that are worst for our environment are the things that are single-use plastic and then put in the bin. But not all single-use plastics need to be put in the bin. Like I said, I've had those for over a decade. This one, this is this lovely Eiffel brown. What I'm going to do now is I only want a tiny bit of this one and put it onto here. Put some water with it. With ink, you can get the sort of subtlety that you can get with watercolour. And I like it for this. I mean, I love watercolour too. I love all of these things. That's the thing. So what I'm going to do with this lovely glowy colour is to put it to the top part of the tree, because it's a lovely glowy colour. And even though that sky is going to give us some rain, it's still nice to have that there. Maybe a little bit onto here as well. And then back in with the brown. So we've got layer 1. Now layer 1's pretty much dry, which is why I'm going in with layer 2. And keep the texture of everything going properly. And the darker part of your tree will be towards the bottom, because that's where all of the layers are in front of each other. And everything is a little bit sort of deeper there, whereas at the top of the tree, the light can shine straight through. It's usually just a single lot of leaves, and at this time of the year, not even that. And I'm dabbing, stippling actually. Dabbing this on. Let's get some down here. It's a great way to clean the brush and keep the textures going as well, because I don't want too many textures that are horizontal like that. I don't mind some, but what I'm after here is the sort of grassy plain where you've got the texture of the grass, but you've not actually got visible pieces of grass, if that makes sense. So you can see that there's something there. Obviously there's something there, but I don't want to be able to see every visible piece of grass. It's as if we're sort of looking at this from quite a distance away. And again, this brush is perfect because I don't have to nurse the tip of it. Just sort of going a bit like that, a little bit of water from time to time. You've got to be really careful with these dome blenders or any other sort of brush with this many bristles, because it will suck the water up like crazy, and controlling it is a real art in itself. Now I'm going to come back in a minute with some green over the top of that, but first what I'm going to do is give it a bit of a blast with my heat gun to dry it a bit. We've got a natural gap that's occurred here somewhere in the middle. Love this. All the rules have been broken. The horizon's in the middle of the picture. So there's a sort of a focal point that's just happened in the middle by itself. And I don't care. I don't really care anything about those sorts of rules. I find them fussy and unnecessary. Right, this is the Emma green. And just going to put some of that towards the bottom of the trees. Again, dabbing. Not much paper likes being rubbed when it's wet. I've never come across any that will forgive you for that very many times. So sort of pouncing up and down like this, or stippling as it's known in art, is a better way of putting a lot of layers over the top. And again, make it, if you see a pattern occurring, break it up. Don't want any sorts of patterns where it goes, you know, red, white, red, white, red, white. That's appalling. But we also don't want anything where there's no green up the top. Only a little bit of green because, of course, it is autumn. But some of these trees that we've had here have only just lost the last bit of green in their leaves, actually. So depending on what time this is in the year, it might still have some green. And then back again with brown. And it may seem a lot of toing and froing, but in actual fact, it's better to build up the colours quite gently like this. No patterns. We don't want that to look like stacks of sheep. A little bit of green, because green down here is where we're going to have green. It's going to be on the ground, the grasses, that sort of thing. Might be a clump of something here. And it's now deep into the ugly stage that a lot of sketches have. This is a sign to keep going. And I'm mixing the brown and the green together, as you'll see, which makes another sort of secondary colour. And I want to really deepen that bit there, make that a bit darker, because that has emerged as a feature in itself. So let's let that happen. Put some of that in as well, why not? Can't see it, doesn't matter. Right. A little bit more there. I've got far too much green out. This is the trouble with the pipettes. I always get too much. Final stamp since it's on the brush. And I don't like how some of that looks. That's okay. It'll work out. Make it work out. Right, wash the brush and I'm going to dry that and I shall be right back. Okay, so at the moment we have a nice dry but very amateurish looking sketch that looks like a 5-year-old did it. The sky's quite nice, but this is all just too samey. What the inks are good for are for putting down layers, and the first layer that you put down can quite often look a little bit sort of rough until you get going with it. So I'm going to choose my forest pencil from Derwent Lightfast, and I'm going to just put a little bit more interest using it on its side, just down the bottom here. Now, forest is a green pencil, but it also looks like a grey-brown sometimes, and it's really quite useful for all sorts of things. And one thing I love about it is it's dark, because dark is what I want here. We'll separate these trees out a little bit. You can see they're all ready. That's what happens next. And this is why I love mixed media and can pretty much tell you I wouldn't go back to any other sort of media at this point, because if this was a watercolour, it would stay forever in that sort of looking like this. You're thinking, well, it's flat, it's uninteresting, there's not enough contrast between the colour values, and you're stuck with it. You can do things with watercolour, but you cannot do as much as you can with mixed media, and I'm a devotee. So just putting that, sort of tickling the bottom of the trees in a way with the pencil. And I'm not going to do anything very much there at all. I'm also going to do the same down here, because I'd like this to sort of stand out a bit, and this being the edge of where we're looking. So our viewpoint is somewhere here. But we've got some sorts of things there. So the first thing is to get in there with a pencil and make it behave. Put some, and the way you're making it behave at the moment, like I said, all of these colour values are very much the same. There's nothing very light. This one's a bit lighter. We've not used that one. We might in a minute. I don't know. I don't use all of them every single time. It's just that these are my favourites. You don't want a picture. If your pictures are looking a little bit meh, it could be because of your colour values. Now, colour values mean the lightness or darkness of any particular colour. These are all in the mid-range. There's nothing really dark. See, if I was to add that there, you'd see, right, okay, we've got a dark colour now. We didn't have one before. There's a dark colour. None of these are dark. They're all middle range. Yes, you can layer them up and layer them up, but there's a limit to how much you can layer them up in anything. That's why I like this, so that I can put something else in there as well. And so I've got a forest and a chocolate from Derwent Lightfast here, and as you can see, they're firm favourites. So those are my dark values, and those are absolutely necessary to give it some interest. Even if we weren't to do another thing on here, but leave it as it is, excuse me. Gosh, excuse me. My allergies are really playing up at the moment with everything else. Even if we were just to leave that, you could actually say, well, all right, you know, just putting that dark colour in there has worked. Sometimes the light values are left by not doing anything. For example, here in the sky, we've not done anything to that. That is the light value, and you can't get much lighter. Yes, you can go in there with white, or you could go in there with something like a light aqua. And my favourites there are Derwent Drawing Chinese White or Derwent Lightfast Light Aqua. Love those two. They're fabulous colours for getting light values into the sky. But I don't want to touch that sky. I want to leave it alone. It's got enough dark in it, and it's got light, and it's got middle values as well. It's got everything it needs. The trees, they're better now. We could put a little bit of yellow ochre in the top of some. Or we can come back in with the ink and just get a small amount of that. No such thing as a small amount of anything with this brush. But we could just touch the top of the trees with some more of this. Ink is subtle. Like I said, you don't use ink if you're looking for a wow factor in one fell swoop. You're not going to get it as a rule. It is a subtle thing, and it builds up. But you know, you can see that those trees are finished for the year. They're starting to go off and starting to become sort of gold, and so you can use a bit of ink in the top. You could use a bit of yellow ochre pencil or similar coloured pencil. I'd like to use this light sienna here just to give some texture. And again, don't do the whole thing, because otherwise you may as well leave it like this. You just put this texture here and there to lighten it all up a bit. Over here it's a little bit wilder. That's another option you could use for the trees, but I wouldn't, because it hasn't got that oomph that the yellow ochre's got. It sounds weird because yellow ochre's a pretty bland looking colour, this one here. It's pretty bland, but it really does make a difference in the trees. It's the perfect yellow. Now this is a real wild card for me, because I usually like muted colours, and I normally wouldn't trot something like this out in a month of Sundays. But again, it's really good for introducing light into your paddock here where there isn't much. And I'm using it on the side because it's more subtle. I don't want harsh lines. I just want a little bit of colour, almost a wash of colour. And you can glaze and create washes with a pencil. I would then go back in with this one and blend that in and knock it back a bit. You could also argue for the point of going in with the chocolate pencil. Just texture. Texture is what this is all about, this bit. Quite put some more colour onto that. And this one here as well. That's chocolate brown. Let's go back in with forest. I just want to darken this bit up because, again, there's two reasons for that. One is it's right in the foreground and therefore frames your picture. And secondly, because I'll show you what to do with that deerfoot brush in a second. Let's do that. Then I'm going to just grab a light colour. Let me see if I can get mustard. That's not going to work. Dandelion, that will work. This is my Turner acrylic gouache, which is another favourite thing to use. And the deerfoot brush, as you can see here, it has a distinct slant to the bristles, and they're placed like that when the brush is made. This is the toe and this is the heel, and I think you can see why. And what we're trying to do is get the paint on the toe area, not the whole lot, so you wouldn't put it into the paint. What I actually do is I'll open the paint up and just squeeze it so I get a little bit, and then just tease the very tips of the brush and put a little bit of paint there. Then have a bit of a stamp on the tile. Don't go this way because you'll get it all over the brush. Go across this way. And what that does is it makes it blend a little bit onto the brush itself, so there's not such a harsh line. And then you can stipple with that for just a little bit. You don't have to do it every time. And never put these brushes near water while you're using them. You wet them when you're finished. Otherwise, it'll just make a complete and utter mess. Just a little bit of interest in the foreground here. And this is why I wanted to make it a little bit darker. We can go back and do it a bit more too if we need to. But you can see it makes a fairly good looking sort of shrubby bit of interest in the front of the picture here. It'll make it everywhere else as well. So let me get another one. I've got a couple of these because now that I've had to wash that, because acrylic gouache will dry on your brush and ruin it. It is not like regular gouache, so that would completely wreck that. You can dry it. Actually, let's do that just to make sure, because not everybody's is going to buy 6 or 7 of these like some of us might. Just dry it so that it's as good as you possibly can get it. Then I'm going to give this a bit of a shake. This peach coloured ink. I don't want too much of it, but again, just on the tip of the toe of the brush, a little bit. And then that can be put over here, just stippled on. And again, it's subtle. Don't expect the wow factor like you would get from a neon colour, for example. It's just a bit of subtle colour. Way too subtle, you can't see it very well. I'll show you in a sec. A bit more. And the reason you can do this is because these are pigment inks. They will sit on top of other things. And it does mean, be careful going the other way because otherwise I'll have it all over the brush. But that doesn't matter as much for this. So what we're trying to do is just get the tops of whatever's growing in this paddock where you might find, I don't know, seed heads and things like that. So that's what we're trying to do here. Some of it comes off a little bit more sort of strong, and that's good. Just let that happen. It'll dry a little bit more subtle as well. But the idea is you get all this lovely texture that looks like grasses waving in the field. It's nice along this tree line as well. And I'm just dabbing, which is nice. It's easy to do. That's another reason I love doing it. Back in the day when I taught folk art and decorative painting in Australia in the 90s and the early noughties, as we've come to know them, this brush used to be used for teddy bears, and a couple of you may know that. Let me know in the comments if you've ever used one of these to paint a teddy bear back in the day. They were so popular. Okay, so I've just wanted to give this a little bit of time to dry because I can now go back with the dark green and make it a little bit more sort of noticeable, because you'll only notice the light colour if you put a dark one next to it. And some of these areas you don't want to notice it very much. That's by design. It's just a subtle addition to the page. If you find that you've got holes in your work, for example, not actual holes, but here the pencil hasn't covered all the white page, get another brush. This is just a round brush, and fill in with some ink. That works too. Probably could get a bigger brush than this actually. See, so that's sort of filled all those holes in, and I don't have any white paper showing through. And I love to deepen this bit because, like I said, it's closest to you. So you can have a lot more detail. I rub it with my finger because you've always got your fingers with you, and they're a really good tool for art actually. You can make some nice subtle effects. So, and as you can see, these mediums are all happily layering on one over the top of the other. Still got some ink, so let us put some other sorts of grasses and what have you here. That's not a brilliant brush for that. Let me find a better. My New Year's resolution will be to clean my brush container out. This is another one from the days of decorative painting. It's a liner brush and it's particularly good for ink. And you'll get some nice, elegant marks with it. As you can see, a lot better than that other little one. It did its best, the other one, but it's just not going to ever do what a liner brush can do. And ink is the perfect consistency. Sometimes I come the other way, but I do prefer to work in the direction of growth. But because I don't want to keep on moving the page around and you sort of never get to see anything, I can do it this way as well. And this is in the Emma green ink. Allow some of these to get quite high because, again, that's how it would be in real life. Sometimes when you're standing in a bit of a dip and there's some of those long grasses, you can actually, you know, they're quite tall. And that all these layers and textures, but layers mean both layers of your products and also layers in your landscape, something in front of something else. I was going to put a tree in this, but I'm not going to because there's no room. We're going to put these grasses instead. And it all goes together. We've got trees in the back, so it's not as if we're no trees allowed, but normally I'd have a tree somewhere. I also like to put some of these on the side a bit because grasses grow like that. They're all over the place and are obeying anybody's rules except their own. But the whole point is, as you can see, the more you work on your sketch and the more layers you put on there, the more you pull it out of that ugly stage. If I had have left that where it was a while ago, you think, okay, just as well this channel's free because that's rubbish. Honestly, I look at my pictures sometimes, I think there's just no way that's going to work, but it does. What I'm going to do now is just come back with a little bit more acrylic gouache in the dandelion colour because I want to further layer some of the stippled marks over the top of the grass. Now that it's a bit darker, it's got a little bit more contrast and you can see it a bit better. And I've not stamped it on the tile because it is still quite wet, and the paint won't travel across the brush if it's not wet, but if it is wet it will. Okay, a little bit over here. Just got to move that page a little tiny bit, and that's about what I want to do there. Right, so acrylic gouache in dandelion is a really good colour to have at this time of the year. It goes beautifully with these inks. Now, like I said, I didn't use this one, and I sort of used that one a little bit, to be fair, but I didn't use this one. This one's also a very nice one, that first one we put out, but it's not necessary to use all of them. That's the good thing about being a mixed media artist. So let me know what you think. That is how I would use inks to do a mixed media sketch. Very, very simple. Not everything has to be terribly overcomplicated. Sometimes you can have simple things and it works just as well. As long as you're enjoying it, that's all that matters. But like I said, if you do find you're not happy, keep going. The worst thing is you're going to wreck the sketch and you're going to put a note on it to say, well, this is crap. But then it was going to happen anyway. You get days like that sometimes, but keep on going and you'll succeed, because sometimes what you need is contrast. Like I said, color values are super, super important. Before I go, final tip with values: if you're not sure take a photo of what you're doing, or do a swatch and take a photo of it and convert it on your phone or whatever you're using to black and white, and you'll see damn well and very clear where your color values are. Because if there's not enough contrast between dark, medium and light, your sketch will be flat, and that's when you need to just introduce a darker color, usually more dark than light actually, because then you'll get a little bit of drama in the sketch as well. Okay, I do hope you've enjoyed that. I've certainly enjoyed presenting it to you. Don't forget, like I said, if you like my teaching style and my painting style, do consider joining me on Patreon. I'd love to see you there. We're quite a nice group actually. There's a lovely little community going. Take care, and I shall see you again next week. Bye for now. Bye.